with the like whole, K to 12 school thing, it's a very tight knit community. Like everybody kind of knows everybody. And so you would think, I guess, me leading with that point, you would think the answer is yes, I showed everybody, but actually I showed 0 people because I think
Oh,
like, I don't know, there was definitely an emphasis on like, academics and like school. And I guess like I just didn't really saw like a point. Like I think very early on, I was like, I don't know if this is something that people would get or like appreciate other than just being this like, little like hobby that she has or whatever. So I think I just resorted to like having my YouTube channel. And that was where I felt like I was free of like expectations or like judgment or whatever. And I was just sort of like free to, yeah, be as creative as I wanted to be.
I'm Adam. Very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no, thank you for doing this. I'm really excited to chat with you.
Me too.
Um,
I'm super, yeah, super stoked to be here.
cool. Yeah, so this is about you and your journey in music.
Cool. Awesome.
Amazing. I just listened to the Live at the Wiltern album. It's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I love the music. The most recent music video you put out is cool. It's like totally shows your personality, like all the behind the scenes footage, and then like you you stab your
Totally.
hand with the pen, and you like
Yeah.
take a drag from a cigarette and just like ugh, and just dab it out.
Yeah.
It's just funny.
Yeah. Yeah. That was very fun for
That's
sure.
a very cool video. So first off, you were born in Indonesia, is that correct?
Correct. Yes, I
So
was.
Jakarta, tell me about that.
It was awesome. I mean, yeah, I was born and raised in Jakarta, Indonesia. I moved to the States to Nashville actually when I was 18 for college.
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously that didn't work out. And
Oh,
kind of
you just didn't stay in Nashville very long, or
no,
you
I did, yeah, I mean, I didn't do the whole college thing. I moved out here to LA to pursue music, and then that was kind of that. But
kind of
I was
worked out pretty well for you?
it did, honestly, like, I no complaints. I was very lucky. But yeah, I was there for like a year and it was great. It taught me, yeah, there were a lot of formative experiences, I would say, that, I had there.
Very cool. I actually recently moved to Nashville. I'm
Oh,
from San
sick.
Diego, so we kinda, like, flip-flopped.
Very cool. Yeah, we had the inverse journey. Yeah, how do you like it there? Is it
I
fun?
love it. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I'm a California kid. I was born and raised in San Diego, and I spent a little bit of time, about 5 years in San Francisco.
Got
Uh,
it.
I was on the radio for a long time, but then my family and I moved to Nashville about 2.5 years ago and absolutely love it.
Awesome. Happy for you, man.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great out here. Okay, before moving to Nashville, like tell me about Jakarta. I mean, that must have been quite a culture shock, I would imagine, going
Yeah,
from there to Nashville, Tennessee.
yeah, Jakarta, I grew up there. I went to this like private international K to 12 school,
Mhm.
which is, I wouldn't say that's like the traditional average experience that one would have growing up in Jakarta. So yeah, I like grew up with the same friends. We literally like exited the womb and then went to this school because it was like K to 12 and then we like graduated together. So it was really funny when I moved to like the States and just understanding like even the differences in school, just how like you go to like a primary school and then you go to like a different middle school and then a different high school.
Right.
Like
And
that's
not
weird.
everybody, depending on where you lived, I mean, not everybody
Yeah,
went to
not
the same middle school, not everybody, and
yeah,
then
yeah,
the
yeah.
high schools filtered in from different middle schools.
Yeah,
And yeah, so you'd meet kids every, 3 to 5 years
totally,
usually.
totally.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think like that it fundamentally just sort of like growing up with the same people was its own kind of experience. And that I think allowed me to sort of like solidify I don't know, like I wasn't really like worried about, the anxiety that you see on TV of like, oh my God, it's like the first day of high school or whatever.
Right.
Which I did feel to an extent, but like I was, I think, able to sort of like focus on, I don't know, like what I wanted to do, I guess. And that was like music. So I think I just sort of like slowly throughout the years kind of like inserted myself into music. And
Yeah,
I think that kind of ended up becoming sort of like who, like my identity, I guess.
sure. Yeah, because you don't have to kind of show like prove your not prove yourself, but like kind of if you're going in middle school, you have to
Yeah,
like now you're meeting new people, so you're like, okay,
yeah,
hi, I'm Nikki, and then it's like you're going to high school, now you hold another group of people that you have to kind of,
exactly, exactly. So I think in a way, yeah, it just sort of allowed me to, yeah, really just like write songs and like think about that only. You
yeah.
know what I mean?
Do you
Uh,
come from a musical family at all or
I
creative
do, I
household?
did. Yes, well, my dad, bless his heart, he cannot carry a tune to save his life. But my mother, however, she sang at church. I grew up in church. I
Oh,
probably should
okay.
have started with that. But yeah, I grew up in church and she was a singer and like I was the little kid, like I was always the youngest like kid for some reason at church and I was always the little baby that like got dragged up on stage and was like, "Okay, now like sing a worship song with us." And so it was definitely like music was all around me. Like I had my church aunts and uncles, that like
Mhm.
um were over every Saturday playing music with us. So I think they definitely sort of like laid the foundation of,
Yeah,
music.
yeah, I've talked to a lot of artists that kind of start off in the church. I
Yeah.
mean, it's not only is it a lot of experience, especially live, right? You're playing in front of people sometimes multiple
Yeah.
times a week, and you have an audience, right? It's not
Yeah.
like you're gonna go play some club and maybe 5 people are there. It's like you have
Yeah.
a whole congregation of people that are gonna be there every single week.
Totally. That's actually such a really that's a really good point that I like sort of like don't appreciate, I guess, or like haven't really ever thought about. But like yeah, I think it definitely kind of set me up for at least being familiar with what it feels like to be on stage and being having people like look at you and like not know the lyrics and it's just like, you know what I mean? So it's
Mhm.
just it definitely was sort of a fun kind of like growing experience for me. That yeah, I realized like not all artists have, obviously.
Yeah. Well, with, going up on stage, you said at a very early age, sound like you're the little kid that came up and sang.
Yeah.
Were you always singing as a child? Like, how did your parents know that you carry a tune or sing? Like, or was it something you were going to do anyway? You were just doing it around the house.
Yeah, I think I was just sort of like doing it around the house and just I don't know. I feel like I remember some of my earliest memories of people being like, "Oh wow, she can carry a tune." And I think that was just sort of the extent of it. Like I never really thought like, "Oh, someday I'm going to pursue music."
Hmm.
Until like I would say, like when I was 9 or something like that, my mom got me a guitar after I had seen the Taylor Swift True Hollywood Story on the E channel
Oh, rad.
of just like, like her journey kind of moving to Nashville and writing songs. And at that point, I had like, I was 9, I was young, but I
Mhm.
had sort of like, I understood that I really enjoyed like language. Like those were my favorite classes at school were English and Indonesian. And I just really had this like appreciation for it. And I loved music. So I watched that and I was like, oh, like people can do this for a living? Huh,
Mhm.
okay. So I asked my mom for a guitar just, like obviously I didn't have some like mastermind plan at 9 years old.
Yeah, you're
Like,
like,
oh,
I'm
I'm
gonna write songs. I'm moving
yeah,
to
I'm gonna
Nashville.
yeah, and then I'm gonna drop out and somehow, no, so I asked her for a guitar and she was like, okay. Um, and then I
Did
kind of
you
I taught myself how to play like on, I watched YouTube videos and I also had, people around me that played that kind of taught me.
Okay. Yeah, so that was kinda your lessons were via YouTube and other
Yeah,
people.
yeah, I never really had the like formal training. Recently I did a session with a producer and he was like, "Did you like self-teach yourself how to play guitar?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Oh, okay. Yeah, cuz like you're playing it kind of wrong, but it like works."
That's
Great.
funny. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can poorly play guitar, and I didn't realize that I was holding the pick with the wrong finger until, like, 10 years later. My
So
friend's like, "Are
funny.
you playing with your middle finger?" I'm like, "Yeah," and, "Yeah, maybe that's why you've never got better." I'm like, "Oh."
That's hilarious. No, but
Uh,
sometimes it works, sometimes it becomes somebody's like signature style. So,
right, or you'll, like, yeah, hear other artists, like, that'll if they're lefty, they'll, like, flip the strings
right,
around or write a
right.
guitar, and it sounds, like, so
Wild.
different, or they have to make chords a different way, and it's these
Totally.
sounds
Yeah,
you never get.
my drummer's a lefty and it's wild. Her setup is just like the complete opposite of a normal drum setup. And I'm just like, wow, that's wild. Yeah.
So you got the guitar at 9, and then when you start writing songs, like how old are you when you
Yeah,
kind
so
of become
I wrote my first song when I was 9, like literally the day after actually I got the guitar because I was so inspired and fired up by that documentary that I was like, I'm
uh-huh,
gonna try it. And then it was basically just sort of like my test drive and me discovering like how to rhyme essentially.
uh-huh,
None of it made sense. It was just, like, oh, day, play, say, way, and that was like a verse, you know what I mean?
uh-huh.
And yeah, that was like my first song, but I would say like my first real song was like middle school.
Okay. It's
Yeah.
interesting because when I listen to your songs, not a whole lot of them like rhyme, and I think that's cool that how you write your lyrics in your songs. That like shows how great of a singer you are because you're singing these lyrics in
Thanks.
these sentence structures that are like it's you get right to the point
Thank
in
you.
your lyrics. Yeah, and then instead of, I mean, you obviously use metaphors and stuff too, but
Yeah.
sometimes it's just like so direct.
Yeah.
But if I saw that written down, I'd be like, how the hell are you going to sing that? And then
Right. Right.
you can do it.
Thank you. That's very meaningful. Yeah, I don't know. I think like there's something to be said about like, yeah, like I guess sometimes the shape of like a vowel or whatever, and it like technically on paper shouldn't work, but I don't know. I have like my brain works in its own way where it's just like I'll see kind of like a very loose parallel sort of like zoomed out between words, and then I'll be like, oh yeah, this can work somehow, and then it does. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, so that's kind of like how I do it sometimes.
So you started off when you started writing songs, like at what point were you always like showing your friends, or did you do YouTube videos early on?
Yeah, so again, with the like whole, K to 12 school thing, it's a very tight-knit community. Like everybody kind of knows everybody. And so you would think, I guess, me leading with that point, you would think the answer is yes, I showed everybody, but actually I showed 0 people because I think
Oh.
like I don't know. There was definitely an emphasis on like, academics and like school. And I guess like I just didn't really saw like a point. Like I think very early on, I was like, I don't know if this is something that people would get or like appreciate other than just being this like, little like hobby that she has or whatever. So I think I just resorted to like having my YouTube channel. And that was where I felt like I was free of like expectations or like judgment or whatever. And I was just sort of like free to, yeah, be as creative as I wanted to be. And so that was kind of like my primary outlet.
Which is interesting because people could just go find the YouTube. I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly.
or like, and
It was
it's just
so
so
weird.
many millions of people can find
Exactly. It's
it.
like this weird like dynamic where it's like, I know you know about my YouTube channel, but we're not going to speak about it. I don't
Right.
know. It was just like this thing, I guess, of, I
Well, you
don't know.
kind of have control of it on that end, right? I mean, you're not
Yeah,
just gonna
yeah,
go right in front of someone. Like you can be like, oh, if I didn't like that take or whatever,
exactly.
I could reshoot it.
Totally. I'm sure that's what it was. It was just kind of like maintaining some kind of sense of control because I could show you and you could be like, that sucks, you know what I mean? So,
Right.
I don't know. I think it was just sort of like my safe space.
Sure.
Yeah.
When you won you won a contest, right, to open up for Taylor Swift?
I did. I did.
Was that kind of the first big milestone for you?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I was like 15 at that point, and yeah, I mean, that was like the biggest thing that had ever happened to me ever. That
Was that like through a contest? Like, how did that even?
Yeah, so it was an online contest, and
Uh-huh.
basically she was doing this thing. She partnered up with a brand on her
Yeah.
red tour for her Asian leg that she would like find like the contest winner per each country would open for her. It was
Yeah,
like
it's so awesome.
search for Taylor Swift's like opening act in Asia. So somehow I just like my mom sent me like a flyer about it, like that she had heard through like some of the other moms, I guess. And
Uh-huh.
she was like, "Oh my gosh, this thing is going." And I straight up was like, "Mother, this is a hoax. Like you can't just like buy into everything that you read." And she was like, "No, it's real." So I checked it out and I was like, "Oh my God, this is real." So I like didn't think anything of it. I just turned on the camera because I had had my YouTube channel at that point. So I had this set up And I was
Mhm.
like, cool, I'm just gonna like try it because like this is my thing, but like I have zero expectations. And somehow I got an email and was like, cool, like, yeah, you made it to like the top 5. Uh, send us another video singing one of our songs. And I was like,
Oh,
okay.
you had to do her song. You didn't do
Yeah,
your own.
yeah.
Okay.
It was like 2 rounds of online, like,
Of her. What
of
songs
her
did you?
cover.
I have a massive Taylor Swift thing right here that you can't
That's
see.
incredible. No, I'm really a Swiftie too.
Yeah.
What did I cover? I think it had to be a Red song, I think. And I
Okay.
did 22 and maybe like Stay or something like that. I
Yeah.
definitely
Okay.
did 22 for sure.
Okay.
And it was great. And then finally the last round was like the top 5 and there was like a real panel of judges. It was like an in-person thing. And then somehow
And you did another, and you had to do a Taylor Swift song at that
no,
as well.
actually
Oh.
that one you could sing any song. So
Oh. Okay.
I sang Gone, Gone, Gone by Philip Phillips. Do you know that?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. He was on American Idol. I remember that guy.
Yeah. I actually I heard that song when I saw The Amazing Spider-Man 2 that was part of the
Oh
soundtrack.
really?
I really like this song. I feel like it could be a vibe. So yeah, I just sort of like did it with a little band and yeah.
So
It
when you
was
get selected, were they expecting you to have your own songs? Like it's interesting that they would have went the way of, okay, cover Taylor Swift songs and then
yeah, I don't
cover
know.
another song, and then it's like now you get to open for her, and then you're just like, okay, now what? Like
Yeah,
they
exactly.
you know?
It was definitely like it was a funny, like a really interesting process. And then, at the end they actually assign you like a winner song, very similar to like American Idol. You know
Oh,
how like
okay.
at the final 2,
Yeah, they give
like
them a song that was
they
written by
give them
somebody
a
else.
song to
Yeah, here's
sing.
your single or whatever it may
Exactly,
be.
exactly. So I think they like definitely just kind of like ripped off that structure and was like, yeah, here's your song. I didn't get to write it or anything. And I had expressed like, I was like, guys, like I have songs, like I
Right.
wrote my songs, and they're like, yeah, yeah, cool, cool, cool. But this song is, this is the one that you're gonna sing.
This is the hit.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, cool. And then I sang that along with like 2 other Indonesian songs because it was in Indonesia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you said you're 15 when you won this contest. Obviously, validation as far as
Yeah.
like, your musical ability.
For
And
sure.
or I'm just curious about that song that they gave you. Was that something that you ever released or you ever played again, or is it just like, okay, that was cool?
Yeah, I never played it again. It did get released. But yeah, I've never played it again. It was in Indonesian and
Oh, it was in Indonesian. Okay,
yeah, yeah. It was
gotcha.
like that. It was like that, like how in K-pop sometimes they have like bits and pieces of English,
Uh
but like
huh.
generally it's in Korean. It was
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
oh, that was a really funny, like very, very cool experience. I say funny just because like I was 15 and so clueless and just like
Yeah, and you're playing with like the
yeah,
biggest artists ever.
it
I
was just
mean,
like it's something that you would write for like a show or like a movie or something. But it
right.
feels not real anytime I tell that story. That's why it's funny to me.
That's funny.
Um,
But so then obviously from there, you were then, I would imagine, known by everyone as, oh, Niki's a good songwriter and everything else. Do you take that and continue then now showing people you probably have more confidence, like, oh yeah, he's some songs I wrote?
yeah,
Are you
so
playing locally? And then how do you then decide to go to Nashville?
totally. I would say that after that, I had like 3 year that was like the freshman year of high school.
Oh, okay.
And so yeah, like through the rest of high school, I just sort of that experience kind of like catapulted my or catalyzed, sorry, that's the word.
Mhm.
Catalyzed my YouTube channel. Because
Okay.
like
So you're getting more people there
yeah,
from
like
that. Yeah.
exactly. So I had it, but it was like my little bubble that like no I had like, 40 subscribers or whatever. And then after that, people kind of started flocking to my channel and like wanted to know, oh, who's this girl that like opened for Taylor? And then that was kind of like when I started putting out my original songs, because up to that point I had only done covers on my YouTube channel. And then yeah,
Is
and then I
that scary? I mean, now you have this audience of
totally
people, and you're used to doing covers, it's like, okay, now I'm gonna go with an original. It's like the people that blow up on TikTok with a cover or something, and then it's
Totally. No, it was 100% so daunting. In fact, like I'm pretty sure at the beginning of that video, I like did like a 3-minute, hey guys, so like I'm really scared. Like, you know what I mean?
a long explanation.
Yeah, like a long, just like way too long. Because I was just so nervous about it. But yeah, I did it, and like I think people were into it, and people were just like,
Yeah.
wow, like, you know, like show us more. And then I think after that, yeah, I kind of just kept putting up more original songs, and then like 6 of them ended up making it on my last record. So
Wow. Oh, on the most recent album.
yeah,
Yeah, I did
on
read that you kind of like went back. I didn't know if you actually
yeah,
used some of the old songs. Oh,
no,
that's
I
really
did. Yeah,
fascinating.
yeah, it's really
Okay.
cool.
Now, yeah, I want to talk to you about that for sure. Well, okay,
Yeah,
so we'll speed up to that because that's really interesting. So
totally.
you go to Nashville. What makes you decide on Nashville? Was it the Taylor Swift thing, or
No,
was it
well,
not
I
at
mean, that
all?
was a nice little like cherry on top that,
Okay,
but no, it was definitely just like I had a scholarship, and I was able to like be a music major and still have a scholarship. So it was just sort of like all the stars aligned, and I was just
got
sort of,
it.
yeah, let's go there. And also I thought, I didn't know, I had very little context of like America other than
Right,
what I saw on TV,
like
right? So
L.A. and New York, probably.
yeah, exactly. And I just, people were telling me like, oh, Nashville is otherwise known as Music City. And it's like, sure, there's music in LA, but there's also really good music in Nashville. And I was like, okay, cool. So I didn't really think twice about it, and was like, yeah, I'll go where I feel like
Y-
I have the greatest chance of like succeeding in whatever it is I do, whether it is school or like music somehow.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
So
so then you come out to the States, you go to Lipscomb University.
yeah,
Is
yeah,
that,
yeah,
yeah, that's what I
yeah.
saw.
Green Hills.
Which,
Yeah.
yeah, Green, beautiful location. I mean, wow.
Totally. Very, like, so close to 12 South. Like the first thing that I did was like when I landed was my friend sort of like took me to Jenny's. You
Oh
know what
yeah,
I'm talking
ice
about?
cream.
Yeah, dude,
Yeah.
so good. Pretty
There's
really.
always like the longest line there, and they have
Yeah,
like
I know.
multiple
Yeah.
locations.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really
That
great.
that's awesome. Okay, so yeah, you go there, and
Yeah.
how quickly do you like? I mean, you moved to LA, so what took you out of the school? Did you start getting some like?
Yeah.
Did you have
So
another big moment that was like, oh, there's no reason to continue with this?
yeah, so I basically, like I did the YouTube thing for many years, and then
Hmm.
that was mostly kind of skewing in the like indie folk vibe, sort of like, because it was always me and my acoustic guitar, and I just sort of like, that was all I knew. Like that was basically the way I knew how to write,
Hmm.
until I discovered production, because I started recording my vocal and guitar into like GarageBand. And
Hmm.
then I like clicked a button, and like this sound library popped up of like samples. And I was like, oh, this is how people get their songs to sound like songs. And then that was when I started getting into production. So I started actually like doing more like sort of like R&B leaning music,
Hmm.
because I also grew up with that. Since my mom grew up in church, and that was kind of what she liked to listen to. So I tried that because I thought like, oh, this would make sense with like my newfound love of production. And then one of those demos basically got to Sean, who is the CEO of 88 Rising, my label, and also my
Hmm.
manager. And he set up a Skype call. This was like the summer before college. And yeah, we spoke on the phone. He's like, hey, I'm starting this label. Like, I really like that demo that you did. Um, would you want us to like help you kind of put it out? And so basically the first single came out the summer before college, as NIKI.
Oh
And
wow, so you hadn't even got to Nashville yet.
no, not yet. Yeah, yeah. So I had put that out, but I had like very low like expectations for it. You know what I mean? Because it's just like I'm about to embark on this like academic journey. Like I'm gonna put out a single just for kicks, and then it like kind of did well, to to my delight, obviously. So then that obviously like set off this whole kind of like existential crisis of like, oh, what do I do in my life? Like if this kind of like took off, what does that mean? Do I drop
Hmm.
out? So I would say like I to say the least, like I was very distracted during college, because it was just, like I had this kind of
Well, the
like
music was working for
yeah,
you.
yeah, like this career was sort of like budding, you know what I mean? And I had
Yeah.
this thing kind of working. And so it basically took a full, like, it took 2 semesters for me to realize, like, okay, I'm just not gonna like do this. Cause I
Yeah, if
was,
you're pursuing music, right? You were at the school.
yeah, like exactly. So it was sort of this like journey of I was in school, but I was also constantly not in school because I was in LA. So I would do
Oh,
this
okay.
thing of like literally every weekend I would go to LA and just record. And then throughout like while I was in college, I think we put out two more singles or something like that. And so things were really picking up, and then I was doing shows, and then yeah, it was this crazy thing. And then I just sort of like called my dad, and that was like that was the worst part of it, I would say. It was just being like, "Hey dad, I'm gonna pursue music like for real, and I'm going to be dropping out of college." And he was just like so very confused and like not down at all. And
I
he kind of
bet. I mean, yeah, I know. I bet that's a big thing that you're coming here to America and they're like, you want to get, you have to get the
yeah,
education and the blah, blah,
exactly.
blah. And you're like,
Totally.
yeah, I'm doing the music thing.
Yeah. Yeah, they definitely had a very clear idea of like, okay, you're going to America for this purpose and not to like mess around and potentially, you know, like just destroy your life or whatever. I guess
Right.
they genuinely was like, you know, they just wanted the best for me. And I, you
Yeah,
know,
of course.
I called my dad and he was so confused and he was like, "Look, I don't get it, but you know, come home for Christmas and we'll talk about it, I guess. I want you to prove me wrong, you know, kind of thing."
Mhm.
Um and so yeah, it was like a very slow burn with my dad specifically. And then eventually he sort of like turned the corner and was like, "Okay, you're playing a show. Very cool." Um, and then it just, yeah, it started very small. It was like a little flyer that I sent him. I was like, "Dad, this is like my first show in the States." And he was like,
Where was
"Oh,"
it at? Do you remember?
it was my very first show, I think was the Warfield in San Francisco. I was,
Oh, no
yeah,
way.
I
That's
know.
a
I was like, I
huge
know it's
show.
a crazy jump, but I was
Just the Warfield's like,
just the
I don't know,
Warfield.
thousands of people could fit in there. That's a beautiful venue as
It
well.
is, it was, but I was opening. So,
Who'd you get to open for?
it was, I think it was 88 Rising's like first little group like run.
Like
Where it was just,
tour?
yeah, it was like a tour. It was a mini tour of like all the artists. At that point, it was so small, like the label, that like the entire roster was able to perform.
Play?
Yeah, and I was at the very like bottom of the bill, and I like opened, and it was great. It was a really great experience. But I sent him that flyer and he was like, "Okay, I don't know what this means, but it looks very official." So like, okay. Yeah, and then eventually it, you know, turned into like interviews that I could send him. And then it was like slow, like it
Yeah,
was a
he's
slow burn. And
watching
then
this work for
he's
you.
watching this work exactly before his very eyes. And then he was sort of like, "Okay, cool." And then I
That's
think it really clicked for him when he attended the first like Head in the Clouds, or the second Head in the Clouds in LA. And he brought my whole family, my stepmom, my brothers, and he was just kind of like, "Huh." So that, because he came to a rehearsal too, and he was like, "Oh, this is like a real thing. Like this is not just you getting up there with a mic." You know what I mean? And so
yeah.
he kind of got the full picture at that point, and he at that point he was like super supportive. So
I was
it's
gonna
great.
say that must have been such a special moment for him to see that.
Oh, totally, totally. And yeah, now I think, you know, like I have the complete support of my family, and it just makes this journey like all the more, like all the sweeter, you know?
Sure. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you put Zephyr was the first full album you put out.
Yes. Yes.
Um, and were those some of the songs that you were writing when you were taking those trips from Nashville, or was that later
Yeah.
down the line? Okay.
So Zephyr, I would say a lot of that was uh actually no. I think Zephyr, like I had written some in college, but then like I basically there was this period where I had to like move, I had to leave the States, you know, move back to Indonesia and then like get the right visa. And then when I came,
Reapply. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And then
They
when I
make it such a nightmare here, I swear.
yeah, it was, it was definitely very hard and stressful, but you know, thankfully, like thank God it all worked out. And when I came back was sort of like when we started to like kick off with Zephyr. Yeah.
Okay. And so the new album or the most recent album you put out was all you said a lot of it was songs that you had written back. You said from your
Yeah,
early
so
YouTube channel. Like, so what makes you decide like, I'm gonna go back and revisit some of these songs? Like that's
yeah,
just such a cool concept.
I know that my arc has been very strange and just wild in my opinion. But like as I mentioned, I started NIKI, to be honest, like on a whim, right? With like
Mhm.
very low expectations. And I was venturing into like a very different musical uh style compared to like what I had been putting out on YouTube. I think mostly because, you graduate high school and you're like, you're you're angsty and you want to rebrand, you know what I mean? It's
Mhm.
like, this is the new me. I'm about to go to college. And so that's kind of genuinely the place that it started in, was just sort of like I wanted to try different things. And then I think like it was at the end of my first debut album, Moonchild. So that was after Zephyr and an EP
Mhm.
of Moonchild.
Yeah.
Um, I started during the pandemic actually. I sort of like I had privated all those videos on YouTube, and I was just going through this like rabbit hole of just like all my old songs and all my old videos. And I was like, why did I stop making music like this? This was like where clearly my heart was here, at this place at
Mhm.
some point. And it really did like um sort of like set off my journey towards like all of this. And yeah, I just had this, like, it dawned on me that I was like, I really miss playing the guitar. I really miss making music like this. And I also still really resonate with a lot of these songs that I wrote when I was like 15, 16, 17. And so then it sort of like hit me, especially in light of like Taylor's, uh, like her re-records of everything.
Oh yeah, yeah. Her Taylor's versions
Yeah,
or
at that
whatever.
point,
Yeah.
All Too Well had just came out. Like All Too Well, the 10-minute version had just come out, and that was so
So
inspiring.
good.
Yeah, it's so great. And it was
That
just so
SNL performance of it is like one of the best things I think I've ever seen them do.
Oh, totally, totally. And it was just so inspiring to me that she did that and just like took ownership of like, her younger self and like her artistry and her own songs. And that was just really empowering to me. And so I was like at this crazy kooky idea of like, hey, like what if I just re-recorded this for myself? You know what I mean? And I had like no thoughts of it becoming an album. And then eventually I was like, I actually asked for a studio day, like, I hit up Ollie, my manager, or my day-to-day, was like, hey, can you book me a studio day? Didn't tell anybody what for. And that was when I sort of like knocked it all out, or just sort of like the vocals, I guess. And that kind of catalyzed that journey of like, okay, I guess
And
this kind of cool. We
yeah,
should.
were those all old songs then, the ones that on this album?
No, it was like
Okay.
half, the back half is all old songs, and the front half is like archived songs, or songs about that era. Nicole, like that record was definitely like, rooted in my high school years, sort of about like your whirlwind teenage first love that ends up in flames, and it's very lovelorn and young, and that was kind of what that record was about. Yeah.
So listening to those songs, is that what kind of puts you back in the headspace? Like, oh, I want to
Yeah,
kind of
exactly.
write to
Exactly.
Kate or like compliment these other
Retrospectively.
songs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And it was really cool because I feel like the first half definitely feels a little different than this. Like it all feels very cohesive to me, but like
Sure.
the first half was, I think, a little bit more uh, like retrospective. And like I think the second half was when I was like in it.
Mhm.
Uh so yeah. That I think that record definitely like was a pivot in my general style, but like honestly, I'm so very proud of it, and it's definitely like still probably one of my favorite things that I've put out.
It's an amazing album.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really like it. And like I said, listening to it within the frame of the live album that you did, like hearing those songs come
Right,
up is it's
right.
really cool how it was all kind of put together with the older songs and those.
Thanks,
Yeah,
thanks.
it works. With the Moonchild album, you put that on 2020. Was that before or after the pandemic?
During.
Oh, it
That
was
was
during.
Yeah, so that one was really rough just in terms of like, like the state of the world that that was
Right.
the state of the world, and just kind of like that was rough. And sort of like I didn't get to tour it because, like the pandemic. And so we did this like online Moonchild experience, which was really, really cool. I really still one of my, you know, like very proud of that thing. It was basically this like live, like a visual way to experience the record, like that you could watch essentially and listen to the
Like
music.
clips, like did you
It
put
was
like
like
did
this
you edit it
long,
together?
it was this long form piece of like it basically felt like a play. Like that's the best
Oh
way.
wow.
It was like very theatrical, and I had like dancers and set design, and it was this whole thing. So yeah, it was sort of like the visual piece to the album.
Okay.
And sort of like I guess I saw that I sort of took it as like in lieu of a tour, like
Right.
here's something for you guys, you know what I mean? Because we couldn't tour at that point. So yeah, no, Moonchild was definitely, it was my debut album. It was me figuring out my sound and what I liked. And yeah, that I call that sort of like my exploratory exploration
Mhm.
record. Yeah.
Yeah. And but and no, you do that, you put out this rad visualizer with it. And was it during the pandemic then you were able to kind of sift through those old videos and got
Yeah,
that
exactly.
inspiration? Gotcha.
So right after that, you know, because I wasn't like my mind wasn't really occupied with like tour, you know what I mean? Because
Right.
after a record, you're like, yeah, this is what we're doing, this is the plan. But after that, it was just sort of this like kind of like die
Yeah.
down in
Now
terms
what?
of just like, yeah, like, well, now what? You know what I mean? So I think at that point was when I started to really like put my head down and just like think about, okay, I just put out my first album during like a worldwide pandemic. What do I do now? What are my next steps? It was actually also sort of like very liberating and freeing in some way because I was like, I could actually go any way now. You know what I mean? Because like
Yeah.
the world was unpredictable. Who's to say that I could ever tour again? Like, so it was just sort of this like very freeing
A
time.
reset almost.
Yeah, it was like a reset. And I felt liberated to do that because and empowered to do that because of how uncertain times were. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So
Yeah, no, yeah, 100%.
yeah.
And since then, I mean, as far as new music goes, I mean, you've done the Live at the Wiltern album,
Yeah.
you the Tiny Desk concert, which is awesome as well.
Thank
And I
you.
saw you played Coachella, which is I mean, I'm from San Diego. I've been a bunch of times, and
Right.
that must have been a vibe there. Just
Yeah.
hearing your Wiltern album, I can't imagine seeing it on that stage. But
Right.
are you constantly working on new songs, or like what do you
Yeah.
have coming up?
Yeah. So, you know, like I really feel like after putting out Nicole, so much has happened in my career. Like it's really hard to even like list them off. Just so many dreams have come to fruition and it's just
Mhm.
been really, really cool. Now I think, you know, after having done, because last year was technically like my first ever headline tour, uh,
Mhm.
where I wasn't opening for anyone. It was just like my thing. And I think that kind of, and doing the Live at the Wiltern album too, after listening back, it sort of just like made me, it, it kind of like redefined how I like to write now. Cause I'm just sort of like, oh, now I'm thinking about, oh, it'd be really cool if there were drum hits like right here for when I play it live. You know what I mean? So I think there's this whole way that like live shows contextualize your music in like in a really interesting way. And so now I'm just sort of like writing, yeah, now I'm just sort of like loosely um coming up with my next thing. And
Mhm.
with the, you know, like think whilst thinking about sort of like, okay, how would this transpire live? And so yeah, just
Yeah, that
I'm
must
writing.
be a new thought than maybe than before. Instead of
Yeah,
writing like for will this work in a live setting, just
exactly.
I'm just gonna write these songs. But now it's like, okay, I could think about it this way because you have
Exactly.
the road experience.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, because now I know that some songs are very difficult to sing while moving around like a stage. And I was like, oh, didn't think about that.
Right.
So, you know, now it's just yeah, I feel like I'm just there's a lot of like growing pains and just like navigating and all this stuff, which is really, you know, it's hard sometimes, but it's also makes this whole thing so very exciting.
I love it. I love what you're doing. You have some obviously more shows coming up with your headline thing, and then you're doing Lollapalooza, which I saw, which is a
Yeah,
massive.
yeah, first ever Lola, very exciting.
Very, very cool. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to do this and hang out. I appreciate it, Nikki. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thanks. No, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. This
I
has been
do
a fun combo.
awesome. I do have one more quick one for me.
Yes.
If you have any advice for aspiring artists.
Um, honestly, just like do it. And even if you're scared, just do it scared, you know? I think also just like it's really important that you don't try to be somebody else. Cause I think like that's where um it gets really tough. And it, you know what I mean? I think it's really important that you just kind of if you believe in it, then others will too. It's sort of like infectious, you know what I mean? When if you're passionate about your song or your art or your craft, like people can really feel that. And then when it starts to feel really like calculated and contrived, people can feel that too. So I think just do it and like do it as authentically as you can be. Or yeah, as you can.
Bringing it backwards.